Hey, what's up guys? This is Brandon Lee with Virtualization How To, and wanted to cover a new feature of Veeam Backup and Replication v11. Hopefully you've seen my video covering the process to upgrade a prior version of Veeam Backup and Replication up to version 11. If you haven't, click the link hopefully that I will be able to throw on the screen here that will take you directly to that video. One thing I wanted to cover is a new and very exciting feature with Veeam Backup and Replication v11, and that is continuous data protection. So continuous data protection is something that has been an elusive goal for many enterprise backup solutions. And this was a feature that was rumored at one point to make Veeam Backup and Replication v10. However, that did not happen. It wasn't fully baked as of yet, so they pushed it to v11. So with version 11, CDP has finally landed, and it's a very exciting feature. And let me describe why that's the case. For most backups that happen in enterprise environments, we talk about something known as the restore point interval. So that RPO value, as it's often documented, basically describes how much data an organization is willing to lose, or how much data loss is acceptable to a business. So if I'm taking hourly backups of a business critical SQL server, application server, web server, whatever the case may be, that means I am willing to lose up to an hour's worth of data. Because if I take a backup at the top of the hour and the server crashes 59 minutes later, I will have essentially lost the 59 minutes worth of data that was accumulated since the last backup. So that's restore point interval. It's very important when we think about data loss. So what CDP essentially allows a business to do is to have near zero RPO values. So in other words, for those tier 1 workloads, let's say a mission critical SQL box, an application server, web server, any type of resource that is critical to the business where any data loss would essentially be unacceptable or difficult to recover from, that's where continuous data protection comes into play. Now, if you notice in v11, we see new features in the Veeam Backup and Replication console. So now we have a CDP policy button that enables us to formulate that continuous data protection policy. And let me just describe for a second what that entails with the policy, and we will see that as we walk through in the video. But with continuous data protection, the RPO value is by default 15 seconds. So not minutes, not hours, but seconds. And that is the default when you go into the policy, as we will see in just a moment. That can even be adjusted down lower. So essentially, your tier 1 workload is going to have protection up to, let's say worst case, 15 seconds of data loss. And compared to what we might say as a average default of an hour RPO, and even longer for some workloads, that is astoundingly much better granularity on the data that you are capturing in the backups, as well as it mitigates the majority of data loss that would happen for workloads that are protected with that CDP policy. Now, let me go over a bit of the infrastructure components here. as I've worked through this a time or two in the home lab environment, so bear with me. I'm going to walk through this just a bit with you guys in this video. So we're going to go to backup infrastructure. And the way CDP works is you essentially have a source vSphere environment and you have a target. So it's based on replication intervals. But the beauty of the CDP functionality is it is not based on snapshot technology. So in other words, we're not taking a snapshot of a virtual machine for redirected I/O, then copying the data changes via change block technology and shipping those to the target environment. No, it actually works on a principle of an I/O filter, which is a special component that is installed by Veeam Backup and Replication at the vSphere cluster level. So you, through the console, as we see the option here, we have a Manage I/O Filters option. Now, this particular cluster I've already went through, and as we can see, I/O filter is up to date. We can actually go in and, looks like I've got a screen refresh issue. You can actually go in, click on the vSphere vCenter environment. You can go to Properties. Actually, it's not there, it's at the cluster level. Go to Details. And under the Details section, we can see the cluster, the vCenter name, the version, and CDP filter status. So for this particular cluster, we see that it's up to date, which is what we want. Now, I purposely left this cluster. It's Pacific VCSA Cloud Local. So I'm going to say Manage I/O Filters, and we're going to see something interesting here. It's kind of neat to see. I had already, in playing around, added this to another Veeam Backup and Replication box. So we notice we have a message, I/O filter is managed by another backup server. So we actually have the components installed on the cluster, but they are managed by another Veeam Backup and Replication server. So even in my environment, I wanted to see how gracefully that handled. So actually, all you have to do is select the cluster, and we're going to say Apply, and we get a message that says some of the selected vSphere clusters already have the components installed and managed by a different backup server. So basically it's saying we are, by this process, going to take over those components, and we can drill in, see the cluster. So I'm going to say yes, and it asks the question, install I/O filter on selected vSphere clusters. Yes. So this process and progress is basically the same progress or process that you would see if the cluster did not have the I/O components already installed. Or at least that's from my perspective of watching them initially installed versus taking over those components. So as we see, this will continue and it will rescan the components, and it should complete successfully. And there we see the process to rescan the CDP replicas. That has completed successfully, so I'm going to click Finish. And now that we've clicked Finish, once again, I had shown this before, but you can look at the details and we should see CDP filter status up to date. Now, when we go back to the home screen of V11, Veeam V11, we have the CDP policy button. So once we click this, we will assume, hey, I can create a CDP policy. However, there's another component that will need to be installed known as the CDP Proxy. So let me show what happens when we click the CDP button. So we see the dialog box that pops up, deploy Veeam CDP Proxy first. So we're going to say OK. And it helps us out here. It automatically pops up the new VMware CDP Proxy wizard. So let's just buzz through here. This is, of course, a new proxy service that supports the continuous data protection functionality. So I'm going to just assume the defaults here. And so we're choosing the server. I'm simply installing everything in this particular lab environment on a single box, just to show you guys the policy creation and all that good stuff. So it asks where to choose a location for the cache for the CDP proxy. Notice we can adjust the cache size value. I'm just going to leave that at the default for now. Click Next. You can create traffic rules to control and throttle your traffic, like if you have maybe a slower link that you don't want to saturate, you can control some of those behaviors here. So we're going to click Next. It's asking us to review the configuration of the CDP proxy, so we're doing that. We're going to click Apply, and there we go. We have the new VMware CDP Proxy process kick off. So what I'm going to do is I'll pause the video and come back to you guys once this process finishes and we can continue forward. Okay, so the process actually didn't take too long, just a minute or so completed. We've got the CDP proxy installed. I'm going to click Next, and we should get to our summary screen, which we do. We've got just the option to click Finish, and now we should have our policy screen pop in. So it recognizes, hey, you wanted to create a CDP policy, so we created the proxy first. Now we're going to create a new CDP policy. So what we do here with the TestCDP policy that I'm creating, got a couple of options here. Advanced controls on the initial name screen. We can do replicate seeding, network remapping. So the way CDP works is you're going to have a source environment and a destination environment. So it's like a special kind of replication that happens. So in like manner, for most replication jobs that you create, you can remap your network IPs if you want. If there's a different network range in that destination environment. So we're going to click Next, not do anything there. In the policy, you want to click and add the VM or VMs, as it can contain more than one. Let's see, we're going to go from, remember where my machine is. So I've got just a test Windows 2019 server, testing some identity, firewall identity functionality. So I've named it Win19 Identity, so I'm going to say Add. I've got a single VM in here. We're going to click Next. Destination, we choose where we want the replica to be created. So I'm selecting my destination cluster. And just a note here, you will receive an error saying that, hey, even though your source cluster has the I/O filter components installed, your destination does not, if you haven't installed both places. So kind of in true form, we with the replication, CDP replication, we choose resource pool, we can choose a folder, the data store. Click Next. We can choose the suffix of the VM that is created. Also a nice feature, verify whether there are enough resources to handle CDP activity. So you can click here and actually have a self-test complete for CDP, normal, advanced options. So just kind of showing you guys around this wizard. We can schedule it. And here is where we have the really exciting settings. So this is the bread and butter of CDP. This is what sets it apart from regular replication intervals or even backups. Notice by default, it is set at 15 seconds. We can set it up to minutes, but one thing I wanted to note, you guys to see, is you can drop this down all the way to 2. 2 is as low as you can go. So you can literally have 2-second RPOs with your destination replica. So we're going to bump that back up to 15. Also, you have some retention settings that can be configured. Again, leaving those default, click Next. You can select whether you want to do guest processing, if you want to truncate SQL logs or some of those type of application-aware tasks. You can do that with the application-aware processing. So I'm going to click Apply, and notice Enable the policy when I click Finish. So that is by default. I'm going to click Finish, and what we should see is this initial sync job that kicks off. So, and just as a disclaimer, I am not going to be showcasing some just ludicrous performance here with this CDP environment. Both of these clusters are nested vSphere clusters, so not really super performant, but just wanted to give that as a disclaimer on anything I'm showing here, that it doesn't really reflect on what the technology can do. So even with that being said, the initial sync, the CDP, does work even in a nested environment, according to some of my other testing. So I'm going to pause the video again, and we're going to let the initial sync get started and see how that rolls along, and I'll catch back up with you guys after that is underway. Okay, we are back, and after several minutes, the initial sync of the CDP virtual machine that we stepped through and walked through the process to create that policy has finished. So we see the activity, and now we see basically there's nothing going on just because there's no data really coming across on that machine as of yet. So we can see if we look, we've got a syncing status, and now we have a CDP jobs node that is listed in our Veeam Backup and Replication console under our jobs node there. So we see TestCDP. Once again, you can drill in, you can see the status. We had a little blip of activity there, most likely had something with the system that was recognized as a change. Now keep in mind we are on this sync interval of 15 seconds, and it gives you a really nice display here of the RPO value. So it'll actually tell you, are you meeting your SLA, the max delay? Are there any bottlenecks, and where are those if they do exist? And of course, just the standard, have there been any errors, warnings, those type things. Now, one of the cool things that we can do is we can actually, how do I say this? We can demonstrate, I guess, how this works. I have an Ubuntu ISO already on the box, and had that when I was doing some other testing. So what I want to do is start to copy that again in a directory, and we're going to wait and see things kick in with our 15-second interval here. So we should see in just a few seconds, we should start to see a bump in activity, and there we go. We're starting to see things start to pick up a bit. So that tells us that Veeam has already started to recognize that the changes have been made on the box. And you can't see my other screen, but I am still copying the Ubuntu file. And as we see here, we've got a couple of warnings and even an error here, but not to be surprised due to the nested nature of my lab. But as we see, we've definitely got a bump in activity. And we can see that we've got data that has been read and is continuing to be worked through. And note, we're back to a green status on our RPO for the virtual machine. So we can start to see things are trailing off here just a bit, and we should see a couple of cycles later. So here is our bump in activity that was literally triggered by me copying the ISO on top of itself or as a separate file. And we see that those changes were picked up within 15 seconds, and those were synchronized over to the replica VM that was running in the target environment. So really, really slick functionality that we now have in Veeam Backup and Replication v11. So that is the new functionality, one of many new things that hopefully I'll get some videos out on some of the other new things that are in the release. But hopefully that gives you just a good overview of continuous data protection, how it's configured, what it can do for you, and a little demonstration in a nested environment of that data being picked up and copied over to the replica. Well guys, until next time, please hit the like button if you like the video, if you like the content that I'm starting to put onto the channel, trying to build the channel up, of course, with new content. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.